Hi, thanks for joining me. So today I want to do an episode of anime I watched. It's been a long time since I've done this, but recently I have had the opportunity to just focus on catching up on watching some of the anime in my collection that I haven't gotten around to seeing. Specifically, I dug out my Masters of Mecha collection, which has, I believe, MD Geist, which I haven't seen, Cybernetics Guardian, and Genocyber. Now, Genocyber I had seen the first episode of. I've talked about it before in with some people who watch my channel in the comments, and it's pretty interesting. But I didn't realize that it was actually a 5 episode OAV series. So sitting down to watch it on DVD recently, I mostly remembered from the first episode that it was almost like murder porn. It's really violent, and I was sort of like, thought it was interesting, but it wasn't really my favorite thing from back in the day. But it did kind of stick in my head. Rewatching it, unfortunately, the storytelling is a complete mess. It's a total disaster in the first episode. They make the whole thing so hard to follow. I almost wanted to fall asleep multiple times while watching it. I think I probably had to stop and take a break and come back. But it's actually pretty interesting. It seems to be heavily inspired by Akira, and you have these people with kind of these uncontrollable psychic powers, this weird mad scientist character, and then these two girls. It turns out that the two girls, I believe, are actually the daughters of another character, another researcher. One of them knows that, one of them doesn't. You're just as well off having me explain that to you as trying to figure it out from the show. But eventually the sort of the plot points come to light. But mostly it's like this weird, dark, violent cyberpunk story. But it's interesting. It's kind of about the conflict ultimately between these two characters, and them kind of reconciling that. It's certainly interesting on its own. But the I think the real meat of the series comes in the other four OAVs, which are essentially split up into two story arcs. So you have two episodes that cover the second story arc, two episodes that cover the third story arc. It may as well be like three OAVs essentially. It's three separate stories, and I think they get better and better in each consecutive story. The second story I just thought was really good. The storytelling was much better, worlds better than the first episode. You actually can kind of follow what's going on. It's intriguing. Again, it's it's a little bit violent, but like the action is cool. Like the characters are decent. It's sort of a cool story, and I got really intrigued about this. So I actually looked up um, who worked on this, because I thought some of the design work looked similar to me, and it should, because it's actually done by Tony Takizaki. I guess he did the manga for this, and he also worked on a manga for AD Police. If you guys are familiar with the OAV series from the 80s, for AD Police, not the crummy TV series, but the actual OAV series, it's not the same. It's set in a different universe, but it shares a lot of themes with Genocyber. You still have the cyberpunk stuff. It's still dark, but I think more just in terms of, like, the themes of like the characters and what's going on. The AD Police stories are really weird, but they're interesting. Think of something like The Man Who Bites His Tongue. He's essentially fully cybernized person, with just his brain and his tongue is the only part of like his body that's still human, and it's a very very intriguing story. Maybe you don't quite have that level of just sort of like interesting character stuff in Genocyber, but very similar themes. Very similar sort of cyberpunk elements, kind of dark. Not necessarily feel good shows, but they're sort of cathartic, and the stuff that goes on with the characters is pretty interesting. Sort of like, I don't know, the interactions between technology and maybe sort of like the dark sides of humanity. And I think this was really excellent. I would actually highly recommend that people check out the full series of Genocyber. The meat of it really being the second and third story arcs, which I think are very good. Um, Now, the next thing I decided to watch, sort of going back to this era of anime, and just refreshing, you know, myself on some things that I hadn't seen, is Roots Search. This is something I discovered because there was a Laserdisc release of it. It's nothing I'd ever heard of. It's nothing I'd ever seen. This is available on YouTube, so if you guys want to check this out, you can. This reminds me a lot of Lily Cat, and I featured that in an anime I watched video. I kind of forget what I said about it, but I know that my general takeaways were that it was decent. It was probably worth watching, but it was heavily inspired by the movie Alien, and that it had some new things to bring to the table, but I didn't know if it was really enough to to have like sort of made another sort of alternate alien inspired story, and it was kind of like, all right. This is even a step below that, unfortunately. Again, some similar themes in terms of like ESP. You have these ESP researchers on a space station in outer space. There's like 5 of them, and like the characters aren't very interesting. You're just sort of thrown in with them for like a brief scene, and then they encounter an alien. The animation isn't very good. The design work isn't very good in this, and I mean, aside from like this cover is super cool, but everything else is it's pretty blah, and it's just not. It's not really well executed. There isn't really enough here, I think, to make it even very interesting to watch. The ending is not good. I didn't enjoy it. So, I'm sure they're welcome to watch this, but it's nothing that I would recommend. It was just something that I wanted to check out, and from this era again, see if it was something worth watching, and turns out not especially. So the next thing I watched is called Baoh, and this is interestingly by the same guy. I guess his name is Hirohiko Araki. Now, he did JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, certainly very famous for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Nothing that I've ever gotten into. I think it's gotten more popular recently because they did a new anime series for it, I think. But I certainly knew about it from the video games. I never read the manga. I don't think we've really had access to it before now. I could be wrong. The anime at the very least. But this is basically another one of those things that came out way back. This comic run was from 84 to 85 in Shonen Jump, which is pretty cool. And so this is a shonen-ish series. I believe it was also called Baoh the Visitor. And they made an OAV out of it. I forget exactly how long it was, maybe an hour or something like that. It was surprisingly good, especially after having watched something like Root Search. For the time period in particular, the animation is excellent in this. It has a really, really great opening scene. You basically have this girl who's on a train, again with the ESP. She has ESP powers, and she's being pursued by these people. Come to find out, like, she's basically just loose on the train. She was like a research specimen, so to speak, and but she inadvertently ends up releasing this other person who they call Baoh, and it's very interesting. I think in stark contrast to the first episode of Genocyber, the storytelling is really good in this. It's not an amazing story. The conflict is really simple. It's basically this dude has escaped. These guys are trying to get him back. But just getting to learn about his powers, and kind of how they manifest, and the action scenes are super good in this. Then you get sort of go back and forth between the two of them being chased, and the researchers, what's going on with them. It's just like a nice way of telling the story, and it's fully competent, totally worth watching. Don't expect the world from this, but I just thought it was really good. I was just for something random that I'd never really heard of before, especially since I feel like I was fairly aware of a lot of stuff that was out back in the day around this time. Not that I saw all of it, just to sort of stumble across this and have it be as good as it was. I was quite surprised. So probably I should check out JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But I highly recommend Baoh if you guys have an opportunity to see it. I think it was only released on Laserdisc and on probably VHS, at least here in the US. So that's the anime that I watched. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I am planning to do another similar thing, maybe joining in to a certain extent with a series that Stefan Homburger started. I assume that you guys, hopefully watch his stuff, but he just started doing a laser talk series. He got a really cool collection of laser discs recently, and he's been doing, like, I forget, once a week maybe, a laser talk episode. So I'd like to do something similar where I go into my anime Laserdisc collection and just pick out some things I either haven't seen or maybe some things I've seen, but it would just, I would enjoy highlighting and especially talking about, the Laserdisc, just letting you guys see that here. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to that in the near future, and I hope you'll join me again for more video game and anime related videos. Take care.